My Democrat colleague across the aisle, who's 80 years old and has been here over 30 years, just said we're on the verge of a shutdown. She probably just forgot that a few hours ago she voted for the continuing resolution that will extend the budget, and we are not on the verge of a shutdown. So I just wanted to note that for the record. I also urge my colleagues to vote for my amendment. We should pass this Holman rule. We need to protect our kids. No males belong in women's sports and schools, and parents are not terrorists and never should be recommended that way.
I'm very well aware the rule of the vote that we took earlier this evening. It may be that the gentlelady doesn't know that there is another body attached to the U.S. Congress called the United States Senate, and they have to vote on a continuing resolution. And when they vote on it, we'll find out what it is that they do with regard to this continuing resolution passed by the House, which, quite frankly, is flawed to a fare-thee-well. Flawed to a fare-thee-well in meeting our obligations, both domestic and international. And by the way, it isn't a law of the land or done until the President of the United States signs it. That may be a basic level, a lesson in civics. There is the House, there is the Senate, and there is the President. And quite frankly, the budget agreement that had been signed by the President for a basic primer in civics is that the budget agreement passed the House overwhelmingly, and it passed the Senate, and it was signed by the President. It's the law of the land, which my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have dismissed, walked away from, and quite frankly, don't understand the process of government, an unwillingness to govern and an inability to govern.
Although the CDC does not have the authority to officially mandate the vaccines for kids, the CDC's recommendation to add the vaccine to the child and adolescent immunization schedule is the foundation for all the vaccine mandates for kids in schools, daycares, sports leagues, and extracurriculars. My amendment would protect children from the experimental shot by blocking the implementation of the baseless CDC recommendation.
This amendment would set a dangerous precedent for Congress to overrule the scientific process used in determining eligible vaccines for children. Kids may be less likely to get COVID, but why wouldn't we want to continue to protect them? And we need, for immunity's sake, we need to protect the entire population, to be able to protect everyone.
If we've learned nothing else from the executive branch's involvement and handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, at the very least, we learned just how corrupt and money-hungry the NIH as an organization truly is. But I strongly believe a larger cut is warranted if we want the NIH to realign its priorities with congressional intent. Not only would a larger budget cut force the NIH to eliminate irresponsible spending and research, but it would also send a strong message to the Biden administration that Congress does not approve the NIH's actions. Mr. Chair, my time has expired.
This amendment would cut funding to the National Cancer Institute by an additional $710 million. I'm a survivor, a 36-year survivor of ovarian cancer. I had the benefit of biomedical research. Why shouldn't other women have the benefit of biomedical research to save their lives, with ovarian cancer being one of the biggest killers of women in the nation? It would also cut funding to the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development by $175 million. It would cut funding to the National Institute on Aging by $441 million. Let's tell that to all of our elder Americans and the issues that they have as they age. And let's cut back that research.
I rise to in support of my amendment that would cut funding for the Student Financial Assistance account by $9.25 billion. The federal government's subsidization of higher education costs for individuals has actually created perverse incentives for higher education institutions to raise prices for all students and prospective students. This is a spiral and cycle that has been going on for decades. The federal government should not have a place in the monetary affairs of its private citizens. That is a matter for private banks, colleges, and students. I reserve.
It was already unconscionable that House Republicans would eliminate federal work study for 660,000 students and eliminate the supplemental education opportunity grants for another 1.7 million students nationwide. It was already cruel when House Republicans offered no relief to rising college costs by freezing the maximum Pell Grant for the first time in 12 years. But if this amendment passes, House Republicans will go one step further by $8 billion below what we are talking about in 2023, the 2023 numbers. So 2.8, another 3.6. I think there was another amendment that took additional money, which means that this amendment would bring the overall funding cut to the NIH of $6.4 billion at current funding levels. That would mean drastic cuts to life-saving research on cancer, on Alzheimer's disease, on ALS, on diabetes, on infectious diseases, and the list goes on and on and on. It would cut funding to the National Institute on Drug Abuse by $166 million. I continue to hear from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle about how upset they are about addiction and drug abuse and the increase of that and what are we doing about it. Well, this research addresses that issue. And it would cut funding to the National Institute of Mental Health by $200 million. Do we not understand that we had a crisis in mental health in this country before the pandemic? And we are in a serious crisis with mental health at all ages. I rise in strong opposition to this amendment. Make no mistake, this amendment will result in fewer students receiving Pell Grants and will cut the maximum Pell Grant award for 6.4 million students who use federal student aid to pay to get a college education. A cut of $9.25 billion will leave the program with a shortfall of $875 million in 2024. Under special scoring rules for the Pell Grant program passed by Congress nearly 2 decades ago, Congress cannot provide less funding than required under current estimates by the Congressional Budget Office. This cuts a Pell Grant to every single Pell recipient. If this amendment passes, the Pell Grant program would have less funding than required to sustain the current maximum award and existing eligibility parameters. Faced with this reality, House Republicans will have 2 choices: cut the Pell Grant maximum award or kick students out of the Pell Grant program. At a time when students and families are struggling to cover rising college costs, does anyone in this chamber remember Senator Claiborne Pell? I remember him. Claiborne Pell was from Rhode Island to the manor born, affluent, but he had a vision. He understood that the sons and daughters of working men and women, of middle-class families, of vulnerable families, had a right to an education just as every rich person in this country does. And therefore, he created this program, the Pell Grant program. If my colleagues on the other side pass this amendment, then in fact, they are on that road that I have said over and over and over again is eliminating public education in the United States of America, eliminating opportunity for people to succeed in this country. Why would you want a legacy or a legend that follows you with that kind of effort? The United States is a land of opportunity. It should be, particularly where it comes to education for our children. It is the way to the future. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this misguided amendment.
Amendment uses the Holman Rule to reduce, no, castrate the salary of Assistant Secretary of Health Richard Levine to $1, the same way he supports castrating children who suffer from gender dysphoria. Richard Levine was a diversity hire by the Biden administration to push the demonic gender-affirming care agenda, and he is unfit to serve as the HHS Assistant Secretary for Health. He has stated that sex reassignment surgery and puberty blockers for kids are life-saving, medically necessary, age-appropriate, and a critical tool. He also said there shouldn't be state laws and actions that dictate principles of transgender medical care by us pediatric experts, illustrating why we need federal protections like my bill, the Protect Children's Innocence Act, for our most vulnerable and innocent children. It is our job to protect our children from sexual groomers like Levine, and reducing his salary to $1 is a strong first step. Our mentally ill Assistant Secretary for Health is more concerned with woke gender and vaccine agendas than serving the everyday health and needs of the American people. He deserves to be fired immediately. This man is a danger to all children and should not be serving in our government.
I rise in strong opposition to this amendment. Public servants should be commended and not demonized. Our federal government needs talented, intelligent, hardworking people who are willing to bring their skills, their expertise, their compassion, their experience to public service. Proposing to eliminate the salaries of hardworking public servants is petty and is beneath the dignity of this body, and is not how we should solve differences of opinion on policy. Admiral Levine, I repeat, Admiral Levine is the head of the United States Public Health Service Commissioned Corps. That is one of the 8 uniformed services in the United States. A physician. She completed her training in pediatrics and adolescent health at the Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York City. The focus of her medical career has been the intersection between mental and physical health, particularly for children and for adolescents. Imagine the knowledge, the expertise, the study, the commitment of Admiral Levine. And given the ongoing mental health crisis in this country, particularly with children and with adolescents, I am grateful and in awe of her expertise and of her service. And prior to joining the Biden administration, Admiral Levine served as Pennsylvania's Physician General and Secretary of Health. My God, what a background. She is highly qualified for her position, and I want to tell her tonight that I commend her efforts to improve the health of Americans across this country. But let's be honest, the Congresswoman from Georgia submitted this amendment to target the salary of a transgender health official. It is as simple as that. It is ugly, it is disgraceful, and I ask whomever is watching and the American people and everyone in this body to note the date and the time when the Republicans in the House of Representatives have hit a new low. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this vindictive amendment offered to target the salary of a qualified transgender health official who has the expertise and the knowledge to address health issues in a way that many in this body are unable to do. I urge my colleagues vote no on this amendment.